Thank you, everybody. The Joint Ag Committee will come to order. Roll call, please. Clayton?
Senator Crago. Here. Senator Ide.
Here.
Senator McEwen.
Here.
Senator Pearson.
Here.
Representative Banks.
Here.
Representative Davis.
Here.
Representative Eklund. Here. Representative Johnson.
Here.
Representative Ottman.
Here.
Representative Provezza.
Here.
Representative Schmidt.
Here.
Representative Strzok.
Will be excused.
Chairman French.
Here.
Chairman Winter.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you, Clayton. Chairman Winter and I will go back and forth, but what we thought we'd do is just go through each of the topics that everybody has a copy of and get your discussion and your comments, and then get comments from the public, and then we'll go on to the next topic, if that's all right with everybody. So the first horse out of the gate is proposed interim topic, State Fair Organization. Senator Boner, your name's here. Do you want to give us some background real quick?
Sure, thanks, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Brian Boner, Senate District 2. This was a personal bill carried by Representative Strzok that didn't quite make it across the finish line. The idea is that, and this has been a persistent challenge so long as I've been in the legislature, you have the state fair, which is supposed to be as private sector oriented as possible. Have to adapt quickly to changing circumstances, and sometimes the state's rules regarding, say, contract review, those sorts of things inhibit the fair from moving as quickly and as efficiently as I think maybe a lot of us would like. And so the idea that we had proposed, Representative Strzok and I, is to make it its own department so it wouldn't have to go through that additional layer of bureaucracy. Say, for example, you have a judge that drops out a couple weeks before the fair, you have to go find a new one. There's just no time to go through correctly, I should say, and dot all the I's, cross all the T's. And so the challenge that I've heard from the Department of Ag's perspective is that they can't treat their divisions differently. So you have a very regulatory focused agency, the Department of Agriculture, doing lots of important stuff with consumer safety, that sort of thing, consumer protection. And then you have the state fair, which is supposed to be as close to a private sector development as possible. So that was our solution. If there's another solution, I'm all ears, whether it be prioritizing those contracts or that bureaucratic paperwork within the Department of Agriculture. But this has been a long-standing issue. Like I said, going back to the Meade years, I'd say it's just, and so we're attempting to solve for that problem. So gave you a reference to a bill that got a little bit going a little bit in this process, but I'll give you the background too, so you can come up with your own solution if you feel the need. So I'll stand for questions, Mr. Chairman.
I thank you, Senator. Joint Committee, are there questions on this topic? Did you? Senator Ide.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Senator Boner. So how do you envision kind of separating the two, getting it closer to the private sector without the bureaucracy? What I'm trying to visualize how that gets set up and what that looks like. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So what the bill does is simply made its own division, so you wouldn't have that additional layer. And so the board would be responsible for all complying with state law and doing contracts, which they do anyways. It's just that additional, they have to submit it currently to the department, and including their AG's rep, to kind of approve the contracts. And so that'd be the idea, is to streamline it that way, simply not changing the number of personnel or the appropriations, just plopping it out of the Department of Ag and making it its own agency. So you would remove that additional layer. There's other ways of doing it. I suppose we could exempt them from some of the requirements or just have them, make the board responsible for that. There's two ways to do that, I suppose. But there's lots of ideas out there. But I think the goal was to continue to make them as independent as possible. We're still recognizing that there's public funds there. There needs to be some accountability, but we made some financial changes, I think last year too, where, they're responsible for doing their profit and loss statements, for example, and then they actually post that on the website. I think that's a more transparent way of ensuring accountability with those public funds, for example. So there's creative ways of doing it other than what Representative Strzok and I were able to come up with. And so hopefully that, explains the problem, and look forward to seeing what y'all can come up with.
Any other questions at this, Representative Davis?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A question, just could what you're wanting to accomplish be created through a rule there at the Department of Ag that would allow you the authority to address these issues that you're having?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, that could be, but that hasn't happened yet. Like I said, it's a longstanding issue, goes back to the meat administration, kind of the tension there between the fair that wants to move quickly, move at the speed of the private sector, and the state government structure that doesn't really allow for that. So perhaps they would require a legislative carve out, if you will, to operate outside the normal rules. But that's something I think that'd be a good question for the committee to investigate. What is necessary statutorily, and what can they do through rulemaking? That'd be a good place to start.
Okay, any other elected officials in the audience like to comment on this one? If not, any of the public like to comment on this? I don't believe we have any. Oh, yeah, go ahead, come up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Doug Miyamoto, Department of Agriculture. To provide some context for this, we did have some legislation last year that inserted more degree of separation between the Wyoming State Fair and the Wyoming Department of Agriculture. So as it stands today, we don't approve any contracts for the state fair any longer. It used to be a process where I would be the final signature in executing those contracts. And so usually the state fair would send a contract out to whoever they were contracting with, whether it was a food vendor or an entertainer or something like that. Those would come back, state fair would sign them, they'd send them to us, we'd sign them and send them through. Today, they send those directly, and my signature is not on those contracts any longer. So what the Department of Ag does provide for state fair now is administrative support, and I sign off on the things that require director's signature. So those would be things like exception budget items, supplemental budget items, those types of things. To this point in time, I have never deviated from the votes of the State Fair Board. If they decide that they want to put something into the budget in terms of exception budget requests, supplemental budget requests, I just simply forward those on for further consideration. They also are nested under the Department of Ag for regular HR issues. Any kind of personnel type actions, they go through A&I, just like we do at the department. But fairly standalone processes now. There may be some carve outs that we could identify to speed up the process with, requirements for risk management, other administrative tasks, personnel, maybe some kind of ideas for expediting state contracts that we don't employ at the Department of Ag. Right now, I think they're doing the same thing that we would do. It just doesn't require my approval anymore. Happy to answer any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Any questions? Senator Ide?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sorry to keep asking questions. I'm trying to understand. Can you give me kind of the hierarchy? You got the Department of Ag, then what do you have, the Wyoming State Fair Board? and then you have a board chairman and members there that try to make all of the decisions, just kind of a little picture of what it looks like and what we're trying to accomplish here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Senator Ide. So yeah, the State Fair Board is a policy setting board. They decide the direction, they decide all of the administrative decisions on behalf of the State Fair. I serve as a voting member, part of that board. I think it's 13 members, but I'd have to look to make sure. So any of the motions that are made at those State Fair Board meetings, those are executed and we just follow through from the administrative standpoint as to make sure that that's all reported correctly in the system. We do the same type of budget reports as we do for all of the affiliates of the Department of Ag.
Okay. Representative Davis.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director, you alluded to that you're just basically the administrative oversight, right?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Davis, that's correct.
Okay, so when you gave, Mr. Chairman, with the description you said there about HR and all the other things that are operate through this, how would, if there was separation, how would that be accomplished with the separation? What supporting group would they have to refer back to is my question.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Davis, I would anticipate that they would function similarly to the way the Wyoming Livestock Board does now. Becoming their own agency, they would do their own budget reporting. They would do all of their own budget decision-making and filing all of their requests that way, the way that they would as an independent agency if you separated the two. So they would no longer be nested or connected to the Department of Ag in any way. You wouldn't find a subsection of State Fair under the Wyoming Department of Agriculture's pull-out budget. It would just be a standalone thing.
Follow up.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman. How many FTEs are involved in what you're describing there?
Mr. Chairman, right now, I believe that there are 8 FTEs at the Wyoming State Fair. I would have to double check to be positive, but it's around that number.
Okay, we're gonna have to speed this up, sorry, since all these topics, because the Senate has to go into caucus at 2 o'clock. Thank you. Any other comment from the room? All right, I'll turn it over to Co-Chairman Winter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our next topic would be the vet tech licensure. Is Senator Steinmetz available to explain this? Okay. Yeah, Mr. Garrett, would you come forward? Thank you.
Thank you,
Go ahead
Mr.
and
Chairman.
State your name and who you represent.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
My name is Richard Garrett. I'm here today representing the Wyoming Veterinary Medical Association. And a little clerical cleanup here. This topic appears twice in your list, but it's the same topic. And Senator Steinmetz was kind enough to, as I recall her describe it, establish a placeholder in case I couldn't get through to other members of the committee and especially the chairs in anticipation of the deadline last week or a couple of weeks ago for requesting interim topics. So this is the same topic as you'll see later in your materials. Again, I'm representing the Wyoming Veterinary Medical Association, and I'm joined today by Dr. Tiffany Healy, who owns a private practice here in Cheyenne as a former you're a current board member of the Veterinary Medical Association, former president of the association. She also happens to take care of our 2 dogs. And for which I'm very grateful, and most of the time my dogs are grateful as well. So quickly, Mr. Chair, if you will, allow me, I'm going to offer you a summary of what we regard as why this interim topic is important to the committee and to the state of Wyoming. The issue of veterinary technician licensure was brought to the attention of the State of Wyoming Joint Ag Committee in 2022. And as a result of that discussion, the WVMA assumed leadership of the issue and has spent the last 2 years examining the benefits and impact of veterinary technician licensure on the Wyoming veterinary profession. A task force of veterinarians and veterinary technicians examined how Wyoming should proceed with the implementation of vet tech licensure. Over the course of the past 2 years, the task force's proposals were vetted during WVMA board meetings, state membership meetings, and regional listening sessions. In other words, we've done a lot of homework on this issue. Ultimately, during the fall of 2024, WVMA membership voted to proceed with requesting legislation to advance vet tech licensure. Given the vast number of legislative bill requests during the 2025 legislative session, WVMA's bill request did not come to fruition. So thus we're here today. Vet techs, and I think this is really kind of the meat of what I'm trying to describe here. Vet techs are a critical part of the veterinary team and veterinary medicine. As veterinary medicine continues to grow and evolve, it is essential that Wyoming adopt licensure for these core members of veterinary care teams. Licensure will not only ensure that vet technicians' profession and the work they do is recognized and valued, but it will also establish an acknowledged quality of care in veterinary practice. Licensure is not about limiting what an individual can and cannot do. Rather, it is about ensuring a consistent level of care for patients, providing support for veterinarians, and creating a tangible representation of a vet tech's skills and education. 5 key points that I want to share with you, and then I'd be glad to answer any questions, and Dr. Healy would as well. Licensed veterinary technicians can be leveraged to maximize efficiency by allowing veterinarians to focus on prescriptions, diagnostics, prognostics, and surgical procedures. Secondly, veterinarians are not required to employ or have only licensed veterinary technicians. That's our take on this. Third, formally educated veterinary support staff will be eligible for licensure by the state. Support staff with on-the-job training will be covered under a legacy clause. I think that's an important element to remember. Fourth, maintaining vet tech licensure will require continuing education courses. This keeps staff current with the latest veterinary knowledge, improving patient care and client services. And finally, recognizing licensed veterinary technicians will increase the retention of those students trained by accredited programs in the state and allow for improved recruiting of licensed veterinary technicians from surrounding states, making Wyoming competitive in the job market. All states bordering Wyoming recognize and provide credentialing for veterinary technicians. So I'm certainly ready to answer questions. I'm grateful for your time. I'd really like to spend a lot of time with you this summer and get a lot of different stakeholders to the table. I've heard from one of our state's leading organizations that they support this initiative as well, this as an interim topic. So with that, Mr. Chair, I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Well, thank you. Does the committee have any questions? Representative Craigo, or Senator Craigo, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Garrett, just a quick question, supportive of the topic. I was just curious, did you also submit this to corporations? I mean, typically they're the home committee for licensure type bills. They're more accustomed to dealing with those types of bills. I just was curious if you had put it on their interim topic radar as well. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Craigo, no, we did not do that. Certainly the discretion of the Joint Management Council will be in play here as well. And if that's their decision, we would respect that. But again, we'd love working with you all during the summer as well.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Senator Ride.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I've got a lot of questions on this. I'll try to keep it brief, but personally, I'm against licensure, and it's just another red tape. You got to get permission from the state to go to work. You got to have continuing education. You got to pay licensing fees. It just seems onerous to, create barriers for people to go to work. If they want to go to work for a vet, I guess right now they could if they want to without asking permission from anybody. So what are your thoughts on that? And, what about the people that are already vet techs or so-called vet techs without the credentials that the state would give them? Are they then required to go get licensed and pay a fee? And they might have been doing this for the last 15, 20 years. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Garrett?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Ide. Yes, Dr. Healy will be glad to provide you some insight. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Ide. So to answer those two questions, first, that within the veterinary practice, we have veterinarians, veterinary technicians, and veterinary assistants. So with this, you can still hire a veterinary assistant. Veterinary assistants and veterinary technicians can do the same thing. With this, what we're hoping to achieve is recognition of that education, so we can try to encourage our young folks to go get that education so they're job ready when they come out. And that they're continuing to get that education as they are working within the profession. So right now, both of my veterinary assistants are currently in technician school. They're doing that after hours. I'm helping them pay for it. And they have the opportunity to ask questions, but right now they're doing the job as a veterinary assistant. So they haven't been prohibited from coming to work at my practice. And I think in the state of Wyoming, in more rural areas, it will be harder to find a licensed veterinary technician, but we're just having those folks come out that are more job ready. Second question was that, what about the people that have been in practice as veterinary technicians? And that's why we have a legacy clause. That's what we've seen pretty much nationwide, how people have handled this situation as they've brought in technician licensure. And so with that, if you have been practicing the equivalent of 5 years full-time, if you do that and you take the national exam, then that would grant you that licensure eligibility. If you've been practicing for 10 years full-time, then you wouldn't have to take the exam. You've had that exposure, you've had that on-the-job training, and you would be eligible to acquire that license from that on-the-job training if you've been doing it for quite a while. There is a sunset on that, so it's not long-term, but it's to address those folks that have been in veterinary medicine for a long time that did not come into this profession with that education being required.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I kind of had the same questions as Senator Ide. I've worked with a vet off and on for quite a few years, and being on the ranch, he's taught me everything. You know, I do cesareans on my ewes, all of that, but I'm not considered a vet tech or certified, and so I think that the on-the-job training is crucial. And so, but I had a lot of the same questions as Senator Ide, so thank you.
Okay, do you have any questions for that or answers for her?
Chairman, Senator Pearson, a lot of those things are skills that you can learn 100%. However, if something goes wrong, you may not be able to handle those situations. Specifically, I think about, for us or for me, is when you have a patient under anesthesia, I'm doing surgery and I need to be concentrating on that. If I do have a problem with a patient under anesthesia, I really want that person that's monitoring the anesthesia, that they can react to what needs to happen without taking the distraction away from me. those are your personal animals and you get to do what you want on your personal animals. But when people are coming to pay a veterinarian, I feel like they deserve that opportunity to have, for those technicians to be educated. And again, I mean, right now, really what this is doing is saying we recognize the effort that you have taken to do that education. If we don't recognize that education, students are never going to feel the need to pursue it.
Do you have any follow-up? Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Yes, Representative Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Garrett, you mentioned some things that if this program is installed, that it's going to kind of take care of some things that you made it sound like it wasn't happening now. Some of the services that are available, or some of the services that are performed, are they not happening now? And by elevating these people and recognizing them, they will happen? Did I understand that correctly?
Yes, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Schmidt. Right now, technicians are underutilized. There's a lot of data that has come out recently and is continuing that we're not utilizing technicians for what they have been educated for. Hopefully with recognizing that education, we will be able to use them in more instances. In the Veterinary Practice Act, it describes veterinarians as being able to prescribe, diagnose, prognose, and do surgery. After that, our employees, technicians and assistants can do those procedures. But I don't think that people are necessarily comfortable with assigning those. So we're hoping that that will ease some of what veterinarians do, allowing those technicians to do more on the job. Hopefully getting better job satisfaction and keeping them within the profession. Right now, veterinary technicians, because they are underutilized for what they have been educated and trained to do, the average life expectancy for a technician is about 5 years. And so we would really like to keep them within the profession for the remainder of their working career.
Any follow-up?
I have a lot of questions, so I'm going to hold them because I know we're pressed for time. So we'll move on.
Okay, well, thank you. Any other committee members want to have any questions? Ma'am, could you give me your name again, please?
Sure. My name is, Chairman, my name is Dr. Tiffany Healy.
Okay, thank you.
And I'm happy, Representative Schmidt or anybody else that has questions, to help answer those, as is Richard, that we can certainly chat more about this when you have more time.
Okay. Are there any elected officials in the audience that would like to speak at this? Seeing none, would any of the members of the public, if they'd like to come forward, why, come right ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Committee, I'm Joey Carenti with Rural Wyoming Matters. We're an informational educational advocacy group throughout rural Wyoming. I'm not one that you'll normally see come up and say, yeah, let's expand government, let's increase regulation, but I am also a licensed professional in the state of Wyoming. And I'll tell you, there's two kinds of education a guy like me gets. It's either clown college or barber college, and I'm a barber. I think it's important that we be able to regulate our own industries. Most of these boards and the licensure groups know what it takes to do what they do. And I come from a place where we know what it takes to put a steak on a plate. We grow the food for your food, we grow your food, and then we send it out to you. We do have problems in rural Wyoming with recruiting and retaining these kinds of professionals. Not everybody needs them. To the good senator from the southeast corner or southwest corner, you could do all that, and you do all that. I could also cut my kids' hair. I can't cut everybody else's hair unless I have that license. Also, people don't want a guy that can't get insurance on his barber shop to cut their hair. So yeah, you could some, but the rest of the industry, needs to be able to regulate itself. Granted, it's through a state licensure program, but we're not creating a new board. The board already exists. We're not creating a new profession. The profession already exists. We're expanding the licensure that they can give for something that's already there, that is truly needed. And if you want to know, I see later in the list, it's to decide if there's a need for more vets in the states and if we have any vet shortages. Vet techs go to any rural area where the next municipality is more than 50 miles away, or that next municipality has a population of less than 1,600, and you will see that there is a need for this. I would ask the committee to remember the conversation we're having right now is about, are we going to have this conversation throughout the year? We're not making a decision right now. I think this deserves to be looked at. I don't think we're going to be doing a whole lot of increasing the size of government or regulation. And it's willful. If any of these vet techs did it in any other state around us, they would have to get this licensure anyway. And the biggest concern I have, and I don't know if we're talking dogs or cats, but I'm looking at if you don't eat them, we don't treat them vet techs. Those are very important in rural Wyoming, and they're hard to find. As a guy that's got some large animals out in the middle of red desert, it's tough to get a vet. We do have vet techs. A lot of them don't want to stick around, but they're trained here at the University of Wyoming. So this is also another way to combat the brain drain that we're seeing and investing in, not only through our K-12 system, but our scholarships program at our land-grant university. So please consider having this conversation throughout the year. And with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Okay, thank you. Does the committee have any questions? Yes, go ahead, Troy.
You cut your own hair?
No, absolutely not.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. That's how I got a good haircut.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much. Is there any more of the public or state agencies like to talk about this? Okay. You can if you want. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
may I make a suggestion?
please, would you please?
Because I'm afraid we're gonna run out of time if we don't get to moving these topics. So we might want to limit folks to their comments to a few minutes. Tell us why you want us to hear the topic, and maybe the committee can, instead of debating the topic and getting into the weeds on it, just for those of you that are new, when you do these interim meetings, you can ask a general question, but to get into the weeds, we're gonna run out of time and not get through the topics. And I think everybody deserves their opportunity to tell us why we should be, at least look at the topic.
Mr. Chairman, yeah, that's a good idea. At the end, we will, our secretaries will send out an email to everybody to rank your top 5 choices. And then they'll compile it and we'll go from there. But yeah, let's try to get through them. Next up is Representative Strzok on cloud seeding, if you would, please.
Thank you, Chairman. And obviously, this is a very controversial topic. And so part of my thought when I was asked to go ahead and bring this, I have mixed feelings myself on it. And this would be an in-depth look. What is positive about it? What is the truth? What are the facts? Is it killing us? Is it not killing us? Is it helping it? Is it not? So we were going to dig into all that and really find out some good facts about it. I feel like there's so much that most of us haven't learned, and we just form an opinion and we go with it. Part of my take was always, is it necessary to put this money into it? Is it really working? And then, of course, most of you know my dam issue. And then I was told if we did not, without the dam, we couldn't cloud seed. So we couldn't do any of this seeding of the clouds because it works so well, then all this water would be dumped and we would be flooded out. So there, so then I was like, I was very willing to say, yeah, I would love to dig into this. Is it something that I think we could all learn? Because I think we all have some very mixed thoughts on this. And we don't seem to get anywhere in either the House or the Senate. So Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. That's the extent of your comments. All right, we'll move right along then. Chairman Winter.
Mr. Chairman,
I'm sorry. Yeah, we have an online person. Nancy McCann, please bring her in.
she's in, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me okay?
Sure can. Can't see you. Just my ugly mic.
Okay. Okay, yeah, that's because I'm sitting in my car. I apologize for that. I meant to be there online, Mr. Chairman. I'm Nancy McCann. I have H2O Consulting LLC and registered with the Secretary of State's office, and I'm a water consultant. Some of you have seen me around up there representing Powder River on other issues, but I'm not representing them this time. I'm just with my own consulting company. I wanted to talk a little bit about cloud seeding because I did attend some of the other meetings for appropriations, as well as I looked online on the minerals, and I saw where a lot of talk has been happening, and it seems to be that we need more education about either cloud seeding and or geotechnical engineering that happens in the sky. And so I think it's really important for us to review what's going on, as Representative Strux indicated a little earlier, that if we just get the information out on the table, then that'll help sort out the pros and the cons, what's really happening on the ground and in the air. And then that way we have all the facts, we have all the parties, the stakeholders, and the opinions that are out there, and also the science and the facts, and bring it together. I think that's important for Wyoming. But then the secondary thing is where do we go from here on a management strategy for drought and water shortages from the legislative point of view? Because of course that comes with purse strings, and money is associated with it. And there's a lot of information out there that we could do. I do have a correction on the topic. I did say silver nitrate. What I meant to say was silver iodide that goes into the air. And I do have another correction where I thought, oh, the committee might have a lot of work ahead on a lot of reading. And so I put 2 to 3 weeks, and I really think it needs to be brought down to 2 to 3 days if possible. If that's too much, I'm certainly there to help do the work. I think water development has a lot of information that they've gathered up over the years, as well as there's other states that are doing the cloud seeding. And so we can draw from the agency as well as draw from the other states and see if there's anything better that can help us and make people feel like they're safe if any activity like this is happening. And if they're not safe, then we'll at least learn this through this interim review.
All right, thank you, Nancy, for your testimony.
Thank you.
Chairman Winter.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Folks, I'm not ready to deal with this Dangerous Practice Act right now. So let's go to the next one. This is one that I submitted about eminent domain. And I think it's something that this committee really needs to look at in depth. There are a number of eminent domain statutes on the books, and I don't believe anyone really understands what what rights our private landowners have relative to eminent domain. And so I think it would be good to study this and I don't even know how long it's gonna take, but I would expect at least 1 or 1.5 days to do it the right way. So that's kind of my thoughts on this. So anybody has any questions, they can ask me. No questions? Okay, anybody from the public? All righty, we'll just go on to the next one.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Up next is Jim McGagnon, Wyoming Stock Growers Association.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate the opportunity to bring this issue forward. Just a little bit of background. This was an issue that we brought to the legislature, to this committee, in fact, 2 years ago, and worked on it extensively. And the committee moved forward with a bill that attempted to address this issue. And then the bill was modified in the Senate, and the final version that was adopted, we feel, has created a lot of confusion. So that's why we're asking to look at it again. And just to simplify this, the eminent domain statute that was previously on the books, or eminent domain, I'm sorry, the topic of subleasing state lands was from an era when typically ranchers ran their livestock on the land, and that was about the extent of it. What we've seen happen over time with our industry is that people bring in all or partially livestock, say for a summer season, that they're pasturing for someone else. They may be yearlings that they bring in for the summer rather than maintaining a cow-calf operation. Also, where we've seen a drought occur, when droughts occur, people sell off part of their livestock because they don't have enough forage for them. Then they get a good year. Well, you can't build back with your own genetics that herd in 1 year. It takes 3 or 4 years. So therefore, you bring in some additional livestock for that period of time. There are really 3 scenarios, just to put it very briefly. There's the case where someone truly subleases their state leases, likely their private land with it, to another party to come in and operate on there. That's a sublease that's envisioned and properly covered under the legislation that's been in place for so long. A second scenario is someone that just brings in all or a portion of livestock that they don't own, but they manage those livestock on the state land. So they're not subleasing that land, they're simply using it to pasture some animals that may have a different brand on them, but they eat the same as the ones with their brand on them. And then a third scenario that's arisen more recently as people become more aware of this is something that's more common today, where a ranch may create 2 corporations and put their livestock in one corporation, their land and their leasing in another corporation. They're doing this perhaps for tax reasons, perhaps for ranch succession reasons. And technically, under the law, the way it stands, if those 2 corporations are different, then they're deemed to be subleasing from the land corporation to the livestock corporation, when in fact it's the same people, or nearly the same people, doing the same thing. So we think there's an opportunity to look at this, maybe recognize those 3 types of structures, and develop some legislation that will appropriately address each of those, so it works for the landowner, but also so it meets the expectation that we're optimizing the revenue for the beneficiaries of state trust lands. For that, we'd ask your consideration of this topic.
First up, in my haste to move it along, I apologize to Senator Craigo. He was up next. My apologies.
Mr. Chairman, I was just gonna turn it over to Mr. McGagnon anyway, so you just saved us 1 step.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr.
So
Chairman.
I did the right thing. Committee, any questions? Any comments from agencies or anybody? All right, thank you, Mr. McGagnon. Chairman Winter.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Since the next topic is yours, go ahead and explain it if you would, please.
All right, I'll call on Keith Kennedy, come up and quickly go through this. And it looks like we may get through most or all of these in sufficient time. If we do, we'll spin back around for more detailed questions if people, the committee has more questions. All right, take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Keith Kennedy on behalf of the Wyoming Association of Irrigation Districts. When we had a board discussion here a couple of weeks ago before these topics were due, at least two of those districts had asked for this topic because they had not been informed by the county of a subdivision that was subsequently approved. And this current statute requires the subdivider to inform the irrigation district that there is a subdivision pending and to go through that process to somehow move those water rights in some manner or fashion so that they don't become orphaned. And we'd like to tighten that up a little bit so that there's always information provided to the districts that a subdivision is being proposed so that it is known that the subdivider deals with the state engineer's office and deals with those and prevents those orphaned water rights. And in our discussion, we also mentioned a couple other things where those aren't dealt with currently. There is nothing in the annexation statute that deals with that either. So if the property is annexed to a town, there's no provision in there that those water rights are dealt with. And last but not least, there's also the family subdivision portion where family can divide off 5 acres and hold it in another family member's name for their use. That's also not dealt with there. And so we think it's certainly worth your time to look at that. And it's certainly better, maybe better suited for Select Water when they're appointed as well. And with that, I'd welcome your questions.
I'll just chime in here. When I was county commissioner, we had this issue more than once. All I would suggest, if this makes it as an interim topic, is that there's a timeline put on the irrigation districts to respond. If the planning department in the county says, notifies them that there's minor subdivision, simple subdivision, major, whatever, and they're notified that they have a certain time frame, 2 weeks, whatever, 10 days to respond to that. Because we did the very thing of they insisted on, I won't name names, but insisted on being notified. We had a meeting. I said, okay, we'll notify you and please respond back. So we notified them, crickets. So if they want to be involved, then they need to be involved. But it needs to be a short timeline. They can't take a month, 2 months, 3 months to respond, because that's not fair to whoever's trying to do a simple subdivision or a family exemption. So that's just my comment. Is there any other comments? Anybody out in the audience want to say something? Mr. Representative Ottman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Kennedy, it's good to see you. Would this go down into issues with, like, possibly deal with the people that need to notify, like maybe even include real estate agents and things like that for notifications to clear up some trouble?
Mr. Chairman, I don't believe that it would, because that's a completely separate process. So I don't think that it would need to go into that to notify other folks.
My experience, the core issue is a lot of time, well, in areas that are growing fast, like my county, Sheridan County, different counties are growing very quickly. Well, it has a major impact on the irrigation districts. It really does. So when the planning department goes through the process, a part of that process, I would agree, they need to contact the irrigation district for comments. There's a buried drain here, where we have a easement for, right here for this lateral, this canal. We've got, for them to identify what that is on that that lot out there. And, but it needs to be a timely process. They can't hold them up. I mean, so I do understand this.
Mr. Chairman, and I'd agree too, that part of the issue is a wide variety in these districts, from ones that have several full-time employees to some that are almost essentially a one part-time employee. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any further questions? Okay, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, as well. Would you like to discuss this next topic a little bit?
I brought it up because Senator Steinmetz and myself were contacted to bring up the vet tech licensure, and we talked about that already. So just put a big X through mine, if you would, please.
Okay.
And then move on to the next one.
Okay, thank you. I thought that's what you meant, but I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
So our next interim topic will be federal administrative fees. And let's see, Senator Pearson, would you like to describe that, or do we need to get Mr. Miyamoto up here again?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to turn the topic over to Mr. Miyamoto. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Go
Chairman.
ahead.
Again, Doug Miyamoto with the Department of Agriculture. This one came to us from our partners at USDA. It has to do with predator management districts in Wyoming. As most of you know, we have an Animal Damage Management Board program that we administer through the Department of Ag. And there are 19 counties that participate in this program through their respective predator management districts. Typically what they do is they contract for trapping services with USDA APHIS Wildlife Services. And so you have money flowing through the Department of Ag to the predator management districts, who then in turn contract with USDA APHIS Wildlife Services for trapping services. Since I've been the director at the Department of Agriculture, USDA APHIS Wildlife Services has waived this 16.15% pooled job cost fee, is what they call that. And so that's indirect costs over and above an administrative fee of 11%. So if we didn't get that waiver, we would be asking our predator management districts to be paying 27.15% in overhead fees to USDA APHIS Wildlife Services in exchange for predator management activities. We've been told by our partners at USDA APHIS there are 3 states in addition to us that received this 16.15% waiver. And the reason that we get that waiver up to this point in time has been because we contribute the lion's share of funding through the Animal Damage Management Board to the predator management districts. And they rely on that money, USDA does, in order to be solvent and operate in the state of Wyoming. The other 3 states that get the waiver have statutory limits in their statutes, obviously, that lay out how much the state is willing to pay in overhead costs for USDA APHIS, so they automatically get that fee waiver. I was told this year that USDA would likely not provide that waiver to our predator management districts unless we could do something to put it in statute that there was a ceiling on those administrative fees. So my plan for the committee was to bring alternatives during the interim about language that we could insert into our animal damage management statutes that would cap that at a reasonable rate, one that we could pay that would be less than 27.15%, obviously, but allow us to continue to be eligible for that fee waiver from our partners at USDA. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'd answer any questions.
Are there any questions for Mr. Miyamoto from the committee? Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, committee.
Is there anyone else that'd like to discuss this interim topic from the audience? Okay, we'll go to the next one.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Next up, Jim McGagner again, Wyoming Stock Growers.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and this is perhaps a far more complex topic than some of the others that have been addressed today, but way back in our history in Wyoming, the decision was made that we needed to recognize private landowners for the habitat that they're providing for our wildlife. So one way to do that was to offer them two landowner licenses that they could utilize as recognition for that. And over time, it's been a subject of a lot of controversy. I think there's some questions today. First of all, is the way those are being used today, is it really recognizing the contribution of those private landowners? And I think some arguments can be made that it needs to be restructured perhaps in order to do that appropriately. The other one is it causes a lot of concern with the particularly the resident sportsman community, hunters, because in a few areas of the state, those landowner licenses end up taking up 100% or near 100% of the available limited quota licenses, and there's nothing left for the sportsmen. So there's just a number of issues arising around this. 2 years ago, the governor and the Wyoming Game and Fish created a task force, wildlife task force, and that task force met several times over a year's period of time and considered a lot of recommendations. At that time, I made recommendations to them and a number of things related to this. One thing is that a landowner can only currently make those available to a member of their immediate family. We had suggested that if you've got a long-term employee on your ranch, and maybe they're actually the one that's running the ranch and providing the habitat, you should be able to give them a license. The task force and the Game and Fish Commission were not responsive to that. Another issue is what should the acreage be in order to hold two licenses? Today, whether I own 160 acres or whether I own 16,000 acres, I have the same two landowner licenses. And there's been some suggestion, which we've supported, that needs to be increased, that 160 acres on grazing land perhaps is not enough to qualify for that. And there's clear evidence that in some cases people are buying 160 acres not so much for the value of the acreage, but for the value of getting their own landowner licenses. So that's another factor there. There are just a lot of factors related to this. This is the only issue I can recall way back 35, 40 years ago. There was consideration in the legislature of making landowner licenses transferable, which other states do to a great degree. That's the only time I can recall when additional security had to be brought into the Capitol because the emotions became so strong over for that issue. So what we're suggesting here is that the committee would take time to look at this in depth. Certainly transferable license is a part of the discussion. Acreage is a part of the discussion. Maybe some flexibility among areas is a part of that discussion. The whole thing needs to be looked at. And I know some of you here have been involved in some very informal discussions we've been having on topics related to this. How do we recognize landowners for the critical role that they play in providing habitat for our wonderful wildlife populations in Wyoming? And I think that's fundamental to this, but then we need to develop an action plan to go with that. Now, Mr. Chairman, as I recall, this issue's also been brought to the TRW committee by another interested person. I don't know where that committee is with the issue at this time, but because this is providing this recognition to landowners is the fundamental component of this, we felt that it was appropriate, an issue for this committee as opposed necessarily to TRW. Maybe it's an issue the committees can work on together, but we think we need to start out with the discussion, is this properly recognizing landowners for their contribution? If it isn't, how can it be managed or restructured in order to do that? So with that, Mr. Chairman, I would be happy taking a question, would certainly invite Senator Pearson, who's been involved with us on this issue, to offer comments as well.
Yeah, I'll offer some comments first, if I might. I'm gonna push back on a couple of things. You said people are buying 160 acres to get a tag on grazing land. There's a huge difference between irrigated hay ground and grazing land. I'll just use myself as an example. We have 400 head of elk come in for 6 months at night. We call them the night raiders. And they do a lot, they eat a lot of food, do a lot of damage. So I would hate to see that acreage on irrigated land changed because, I mean, especially getting this time of the year as the ground's starting to thaw out, you get a corrugated alfalfa field and you get 400 head of elk trailing across it at an angle, make a rut like that, you cannot corrugate that rut out. So as you water the water, you plow the hayfield up, which is that's a big damage claim. And the other thing I'll kind of
Mr.
push
Chairman,
back
if I
on.
may, we would totally agree with you, and that's why I've been specific. If we increase acreage, it's on grazing land, not on cropland.
Okay, thank you. And the other one on your comment on a lot of these landowner tags kind of use up a lot of the tags in the trophy area, whatever. Well, you didn't mention commissioner tags. Now, up in our area, all the commissioner tags from across the state, they all log into Park County. And if there's 50 bull tags in an area, that's crucial. I mean, that's where the big bull elk are. They take half of them or better. And the locals are just furious. And then they point the finger at the landowner because you got a tag. And it's like, wait a minute. You need to talk with Game and Fish on these commissioner tags. If you're a commissioner from Lusk, then you get to hunt in the Lusk area, not come to Park County and shoot the big trophy elk. So anyway, who wanted, Senator Pearson, were you, have your hand up?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Jim, for bringing this topic to interim. I do think that it is something that needs to be discussed between all parties involved. And as many have said, I don't think that people realize that you have got to have the ranchers there to, you know, and appreciate what they do, trying to keep their ranches going, feeding this wildlife. You know, and we do deal with a lot of damage on our lands. And so I think that this is a discussion that needs to be heard. And hopefully we can come to some sort of agreements, but because it is very controversial, as I've learned this year. So, thank you.
Any other comments? Any comments from any agencies out there or public? We'll go back to Mr. McAgna for further comment. So there, yeah, I'm just glad that you appreciate that there's a difference between the irrigated cropland and the other, because it's, man, what they do to, and I hate to use myself, but that's what I know, right?
Certainly.
What they do to my fences, it just, you'd think a big old elk could jump a fence. No, they want to go through the fence. And the damage And I've had instances where I've had 300 acres of grass slash hay that grew back, foot tall. And oh, wow, that's a lot of pasture there. And after 400 head of elk, or if you get several big snowstorms, you have 1,000 head of elk. Pretty soon it's gone. They eat it all up. I've had it where they eat 300, eat all your pasture. Then what are you doing? You're feeding hay that you had planned on selling. So the economic impact of that, and it's a small reward, whatever term you want to use, to get a landowner tag, because I bet there's some years I've lost $50,000. And is that landowner tag worth 50,000 to me or not, So further comment, Mr.
Well, I might
Magagna?
just on that note would mention something, you'd be familiar with this, Mr. Chairman. We were able to pass, or we attempted to pass some legislation last year to provide for direct payments to landowners where excess numbers of elk were causing damage on their property. The legislation was not successful, but as a result of that effort, the Game and Fish did step forward, the commission this past year, and they've developed a protocol now where if elk in an area exceed their management numbers, or even if you just have excess elk on your property, they will make payments to you once that's verified based on an animal unit basis, just the same as if you were leasing your private land to someone to run their cows on. And so that is a major step forward, but I think all of those factors need to be considered in this when we look at it. Another one that I didn't mention, but landowner coupons, which are attached to these licenses. There again, you only get a coupon if that hunter comes on you as a successful hunter. Perhaps some discussion should take place. Should you get that coupon for allowing that access, irrespective of whether or not they were successful? And it's a rather broad issue, even the commissioner licenses. I think there's some abuses there, and I certainly recognize some and that concern me, but I guess it would be up to the committee if you're assigned this topic, how broad you want to be with it, or how much you want to confine it down to the landowner licenses in particular, but it's a complex issue.
Thank you, Mr. Magagna. Yeah, it is. I guess that's my question or my comment to the committee. This could take up a full 2-day conversation, so it's very important, very lot of pieces to this pie. So with that, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to make a comment. I agree so much with what Mr. Magagna is saying and what Laura has done and brought forward this year in this session. I spent a little time with the Game and Fish Commission. I know a lot of these programs, and a lot of these programs were met and set up with great intentions, and they worked great for a lot of years, but I think there's a lot of topics we need to talk about along with this when it comes to landowners and sportsmen. And I think this would be a great opportunity to do that in the interim with a lot of good folks that have interest from both sides. Sportsmen, the hunting community is important to Wyoming, and so is the traditional ranching families. And I think those are the two things we really need to focus on when we talk about these things, because that's truly what this state is all about in many, many ways, is sportsmen hunting outdoors and traditional ranches. So I would encourage the committee to really, really consider taking this as a topic in the interim. Thanks.
Thank you, Representative. And I would add farms and farm. Representative Provenza?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It'll get easier as you go along. You can ask your co-chairman. Provenza it starts flowing. It's just it's like
Provenza.
there we go. It's like a bug. So I serve on TRW, and I think that this conversation might be a better fit for there. We've had a lot of bills this session that dealt with how we did game tags and certain things. I think that committee would also be more than willing and happy to be good stewards of the ranch community in conjunction with these conversations. But given that that is the home committee for game and fish, I think that it might make more sense. And we also are talking about other issues that are related to some of these different aspects that have been talked about today in that committee that I think it might fit well with. And then we don't have to deal with all the people that are up in arms and protesting and making ourselves really unpopular potentially. So we can put that on TRW.
Mr. Chairman, if I may comment further?
Certainly, just go ahead.
All right, good thoughts. Provenza. Yeah, there you go. We have probably 20 minutes before the Senate needs to boogie and go to caucus. So does the committee want to revisit any of the topics we've discussed? Representative Eklund.
There's a couple I'd like to comment on. First of all, the one with the administration fees, I think that could be a quick fix, and I'm not sure, but that one sounds like something really important, because we can't continue to do it the way we're doing it. And on cloud seeding, I'm getting so tired of being about the only one who understands what we did. We have the person, Wyoming has as a state employee, the person who ran what was called the Weather Modification Project. And I think it would be a huge benefit for this committee to learn as much as they can about it. We may have killed one of the big tools you need in the Colorado River Compact. They need everything everything they can get to stay out of court. And I think the Ag Committee ought to be involved in trying to do that, as well as Select Water and others. So I think the cloud seeding would be a great time to get some people educated, all of us educated on it.
Quick question, follow up.
Yeah, Senator Iden and Senator Pearson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Representative Eklund, I agree. It would be nice to get maybe opposing forces on that too in the committee, so you can kind of hear both sides of the argument. I think that's what we're shooting for here, because we have the same issues in our body over there, on everybody confused about the good, the bad, and the ugly of cloud seeding. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Pearson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So what I'm wondering is, along with this cloud seeding topic, could we also add in the geoengineering issue, or no, or that needs to stay separate? I'm just asking. Thank you.
Representative Provenza.
Just to answer that question, I mean, I think it'll be up to the committee, the management committee, to approve what the chairman come up with, because the chairman will review what our topics are, and then they'll propose it to management council, and then management council will kind of give them the final say. So, but typically, if it's not in what were the proposed topics by the deadline that we put in, they're not considered, unless management council says, I think your committee's missing this big thing out of the conversation, and we're gonna assign this to you regardless of whether it was submitted as an interim topic. So that's the procedure to answer your question.
Follow up, Senator Pearson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I also wanted to make a comment on this landowner license issue. I absolutely think that Ag is the proper committee to have this in. I know that people believe that TRW is the right place to have it because of the wildlife, but the reason that this issue is brought is because of the landowners and what they're seeing on their lands, the depredation to their lands. And so I think that this is the proper committee to have this issue in. Thank you.
Okay, does everybody have their preferences? Okay,
Mr. Chairman, if I may,
yes, go ahead.
I think the LSO would like everybody to go through and rank your 1 through 5, your top 5 topics here. And they will send an email to you asking for your top 5. And so please go through them, rank them, and get back to LSO. And then they will discuss it with their attorneys and with the chairman of the two of us. And then we'll proceed from there, probably onto management council at that point. So please make sure, hopefully you got enough description or discussion on them to feel comfortable in your ranking them. And then we'll move on down the process. Oh, Anna?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just so everybody on the committee is aware, Ms. Talbot's going to be sending out an email soon regarding your preferences for materials, whether you want them by email or by mail. And then also we have right now our dates for ag are June 10th and 11th, August 26th and 27th, and October 28th and 29th.
Would you name the towns?
I can do that again. The towns too?
Name the towns
Yeah.
too, if you got it.
So ag will be meeting June 10th and 11th in Powell, August 26th and 27th in Casper, and October 28th and 29th in Cheyenne.
Are you good with those dates?
Yeah, Anna, I think we're good with those dates, so, thank you. Okay, we'll just, I guess we can call this meeting over with and go and make our preferences and then we'll get back together.
Joint Ag Committee's adjourned.